This is National School Choice Week, and we mark the occasion by taking a look at Arizona's record on school choice. In the early 1990s, Arizona established one of the strongest charter school laws in the nation, and the state's pursued a variety of market-driven alternatives to public education ever since. Here to talk about Arizona's successes and shortcomings with school choice is Lisa Graham Keegan. She's a former state lawmaker and superintendent of schools who helped craft much of Arizona's school choice legislation. More recently, she founded the Education Breakthrough Network, a one-stop shop for education choices everywhere. And also joining us is ASU Professor David Garcia, a former assistant superintendent of public instruction. He now directs the Arizona Education Policy Initiative for ASU's Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College. Good to see you both. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go ahead and define terms. What does school choice mean in Arizona?
Well, in Arizona, first of all, school choice is simply parents choosing the school that their child goes to instead of simply being assigned to one by virtue of where they live. So in Arizona, we have private schools that parents choose if they can afford them. We have tuition tax credits, which provide scholarships for parents who might want a private school. We have public charter schools, which you talked about, 120,000 students in public charter schools. We have online learning. Sometimes those are charter schools, sometimes those are private home schools, homeschooling generally. So it's a pretty wide spectrum of what we offer in terms of choices in Arizona.
How do you see school choice as being defined in Arizona?
Well, I think our parents in Arizona have just about more choice than any other state in the country. In tuition tax credits, in open enrollment, and that phenomenon has been in place for at least 20 years. We've had a whole generation of students go through the public education system with choice and having many choices available to them. So there have been very few states that have pushed school choice like Arizona.
Okay, with that in mind, is school choice working? Are kids being educated better now than they were then?
The interesting paradox with school choice is that school choice is for individual parents an opportunity to choose the best school for their child. I'm taking advantage of school choice. My daughter does not go to the neighborhood school. She goes to another school that I've chosen. The paradox is that that does not always lead to overall achievement and gains for the entire system. It isn't just that if parents choose individual schools that the entire system is going to benefit as a result of those individual choices.
How do you work that dynamic?
Because I think it's so small still. As a percentage of public education, that over time what's happening is the longer we do this, the better the choice schools get and the more people we attract into it who are really great at what they do and do some really breakthrough things. So for example, in Arizona, of the top 15 high schools or so, you get the significant percentage of those, maybe 10, are public charter schools. And that's an interesting phenomenon because high school we struggle with in Arizona. And I think David's absolutely right. We don't have data yet that says, look, a choice system, all of the kids in that system are doing better than all of the kids in the assigned system. That's not what you want to look at. You want to look at who's getting better faster, what are parents choosing. This year in Arizona, we grew by 1%, but district enrollment was down. Choice schools are up. I think that crossover is indicative of the fact that choice is probably where we're headed in the future. And so more and more parents are going to start to make this choice. We're going to quit kind of assigning kids to schools, and choice is going to become sort of the wave of the future.
I think in Arizona, we haven't assigned schools. I'm not certain that our parents look at the assigned school. They look at all schools, and it's very common in Arizona. With the advent of choice, though, it's interesting to look at parents as more mature choosers. One thing that I've looked at is re-enrollment. Repeat customers in this case. And it's interesting because of our failing schools in Arizona, 86% of parents of students re-enroll. In excelling schools, it's only 91. There's only a 5% difference. And something that happens that I'm not sure we're appreciating in the school choice debate is once parents choose a school, they're not ready to move again. You know what they want to do? They want that school to work. And they do something that no other consumer does in a market. They stay and they help the school improve. A good example is No Child Left Behind made school principals announce to their parents that the school was failing and that they could go anywhere else in the district on the district's dime. And only 3.8% of eligible parents took advantage of it. Most of them turned and tried to improve the school.
A bunch of reasons for that, I would argue, though, David, in addition, was that the school districts were not really forthcoming, a lot of them, with telling parents, not necessarily in Arizona, but across the country, a lot of what happened there, because I addressed this in Los Angeles, the school districts just weren't giving the parents the information that they had the opportunity to use that money and go to another school. I think that to sort of set this up as a dichotomy is a false one. We are emerging in the way that we provide education to our kids. Online learning is making a huge difference. So one of the best schools in Arizona called Carpe Diem, which is this huge hybrid delivery system of an online system with a brick and mortar, very different delivery, hugely performing out in Yuma. Really fun to see. And then you've got the traditional schools like the Basis Charter School, been named the best school in the country. Basis looks like a classroom you or I would remember. I would remember, we'll say, I'm older. So, but it really hasn't changed that much, just a fabulous school. So all of these different models, they're the best they can be within their own model. So it isn't a matter of we're looking for this one best thing. What we're looking for is a lot of models that can serve a lot of parents, and we give them the information about what they've got available.
But for those, and you referred to this earlier, for those who are waiting for the rising tide to lift all boats, you're saying that may not be necessarily the best way to measure this,
I don't think it is.
But some folks are looking for that, and some folks thought that was promised originally. Talk to us about that.
Well, that's true. Well, for sure that if everyone around you is doing a really great job and your reputation is you're not doing a very good job, and by the way, that reputation can only come once we do things like provide good information about how kids are doing with assessments. Once that gets out there, the school that's not doing a great job does better through the sort of competitive environment. That we know is true. And yes, that was promised. But the point should not be, well, we've got this larger system, and what we want to do is we just want to use these sort of schools as though they're marginal or peripheral or unimportant. We're just trying to make this thing in the middle better. No, everything's important. There's a child in every school.
How do you see that, the lifting of all boats, the rising tide?
That hasn't turned out to be. In the best cases, folks have looked at this, the gains have been modest. And it hasn't been the kind of radical improvements that people promised. But then again, the comparisons that we were made off of product goods. Things like mail service, stuff that's easy to pick and easier to fix. Education is much more complex, and the choices of an education are much more complex. And like I mentioned, interestingly, once people choose a school, they get invested in that school like no other business. It's not as if when a product isn't working for me, I don't turn to the company and say, let me help you improve it. I'm more likely to move. What we find is that parents, once they choose, want the school to work. A good example is a student of mine, as a principal, had to tell her parents that their school was failing. They didn't get up and leave. They turned to her and said, what do we do? And where do we go from here? So I think we need a more sophisticated understanding of what parents look like who are in the choice environment.
Well, although there are a lot of parents, we've got 20,000 parents who would like to be in the scholarship program in Arizona. We've got a significant number, 55% of the charter schools responded to a survey, said, yeah, they've got waiting lists, that parents would like to get in that school. So yes, parents would love for the school that they choose to be great. But they would also love to be in a great school, and lots of them are sitting on active waiting lists. And so Arizona's got all of that going. And I think what's important is when a school really breaks through, I mean, I don't want this conversation to lead people to believe that choice schools or schools that are great for kids, all this, you just kind of get a marginal improvement. Phoenix Collegiate Academy, where we kicked off National School Choice Week this morning. Tiny little school, all Teach for America teachers, right in the middle of the Roosevelt School District, and they about double those kids' scores in the very first year. So when a school is getting it absolutely right, the difference in the child's life is just enormous.
How do you get that absolute right and that difference for more kids? Because people will listen to this conversation and say, all I hear is negative stuff about Arizona kids, Arizona schools. It's always ranked 40-something, if not 50th.
Sure.
What happened? We have 20 years of this now. What's going on?
Well, I think that getting it right, we can point to, obviously, traditional public schools. There's a high school in Tempe, Desert Vista, who has students routinely passing SAT. But being charter in and of itself doesn't mean that suddenly you are going to get it right. One of the things that you need to look at here is, what are we asking some of our charters to do? Is it different than our traditional public school system? In what respects? We've got a bigger standards movement that I think sometimes thwarts innovation. The idea was that charter schools were going to be more innovative. They largely haven't been innovative, but then again, I'd argue we may not have given them the chance they need to be innovative. If you look at why parents choose charter schools, number one reason is class size and school size, number one. And yet, we're not learning from that. We continue to build traditional public high schools that are much bigger than they should be. Most parents choose schools because they want to be in front of teachers and they want the close environment.
Which is a great part about school choice, is that we are learning better things about how to educate kids from the innovation of choice, and that should continue to happen.
And that's where we'll stop the conversation. Good stuff. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.